Welcome to the Revenue Builders Podcast, a weekly show featuring B2B sales leaders and executives. Hosted by five-time CRO John McMahon and Force Management co-founder John Kaplan, the show goes behind the scenes with the people who have been there, done that, and seen the results. If you enjoy our content, please subscribe, rate, and review the show to help us reach more people. Revenue Builders is brought to you by Force Management. We help companies improve sales performance, executing the growth strategy at the point of sale. Find us at forcemanagement.com. Enjoy today's episode.
Welcome to another episode of the Revenue Builders Podcast. My name is John Kaplan. I'm joined by my great friend and five-time CRO and author of the award-winning book, The Qualified Sales Leader, John McMahon. And we're really excited to have this guest back with us for the second time on Revenue Builders. Hollie Castro is a board member, business executive, and trusted advisor to public and private companies with extensive global experience delivering sustainable scale and growth. She has a proven track record in IPO, business transformation, global expansion, and M&A with multiple public companies, including Yeti, BMC Software, Talisman, Energy, Cisco, GE, and privately held companies and SaaS startups like Miro and Coney. She now brings her expertise to corporate and advisory boards through her new company called HC Advice, where she's helping companies with strategic agility, human capital management strategy, and corporate governance. Hollie is a very sought-after thought leader. We're very glad to have her back on Revenue Builders. Great to have you back with us, Hollie. Thanks again for joining us. We encourage everybody, we'll put it in the show notes of Hollie's previous episode with us on Revenue Builders, which was extremely popular. So first of all, congratulations on your new company, HC Advice. Can you tell us a little bit about it?
Yeah, sure. So I'm a five-time CHRO. I've done 3 public and 2 private companies, which allows me to have, a nice portfolio of experience around human capital. And so I'm doing a lot of advisory work with different companies, and in particular around talent and people strategy, how to get people to solve better problems, as well as doing some board work. So that's what HC Advice is about.
Yeah, congratulations. I can't think of anybody better in that field with that level of expertise. Hey, so we've got a couple things we want to talk about today. Based upon our, just as a process point, we normally get together with the guests beforehand and we talk about some stuff, and we talk about, asked Hollie, what's she hearing? What are people asking her advice on? And so one of the things I thought I'd just start with is, what are you seeing that leaders need to be aware of, and to cultivate good teams? And I know you've been getting bombarded a lot with a few things, the different generations, and also, generative AI. So I think we're going to flow around those couple of themes today. But why don't we start with the just, in general, what are you getting bombarded with?
Yeah. Okay. Thanks. I think the first thing I would say is that I'm getting a lot of questions about, and how do you manage different generations in the workforce? And so the first thing I would say is that, different companies are experiencing different sets of problems based on their workforce, based on how their workforce is made up, as well as their customer makeup. Some companies have 4 or 5 generations at work right now, and they're managing 4 or 5 generations' needs and wants and desires and passions, motivation levels. And some only have 2 or 3. The last company I was with, we really were a Gen X. Gen X was probably, less than 5% of the company, and it was a millennial Gen Z company. Gen X is moving to the boardroom. Millennials are starting to take up residency in the C-suite. Your oldest millennial's 43 this year. And Gen Z is marching quickly to people leadership roles. So your oldest Gen Z person is 27. So, I'd say, the first thing is just sort of awareness about what your workforce looks like. We had some earlier dialogue about also awareness about what your belief systems are as a leader. How do you think about leadership and being really clear with yourself? And so what do we know about millennials and Gen Z specifically? The millennials, they're digital pioneers. They grew up with the rise of the internet, smartphone, social. They really have a high value around education and self-development. They're probably the most educated generation of all so far. They have a huge value around work-life balance. Financially, they've faced a ton of financial challenges at a very early age, which has also, in some cases, really affected their career trajectory. They are brand loyalists. They really resonate with brands that mirror their values. They're socially conscious, and they're delaying like what we would call traditional milestones, like having kids or getting married, things like that. So that's the millennial group. The Gen Z group, on the other hand, is in some cases similar, but in other cases quite different. They're digital natives. They grew up with all these technologies. They didn't have to adapt and learn them. They are saving far more than their previous generation, the millennials. They have a big entrepreneurial spirit. So think, side gigs. The Gen Zers are really about the side gigs. It's one of the most diverse and inclusive generations. And sort of the sub-bullet on that is they are the ones that broke open the whole conversation around mental health awareness. What used to be a taboo conversation in organizations is now, sort of a wide open conversation. And they have a lot shorter attention spans, think TikTok versus YouTube. So those are just some of the differences. There's tons of similarities as well as you look across generations. But I think, my advice to folks is really start with introspection. Think about how you're building high-performing teams. Think about how you're communicating, and do any of these attributes require different sets of communication? How do these characteristics play into your hiring process as you're building great teams and as you're building a culture? How do you communicate with them? How do you motivate them? How do you train them? This isn't about having different set of treatment for different people, but it is about understanding, just as you think about yourself and as a leader, understanding how you need to potentially adapt some of your communication style.
Yeah, I'm kind of glad that you said that because if I'm going to be a leader and I want to generate a culture of meritocracy and I outline standards of performance, I have to be really clear on the standards of performance, what happens on accountability, what happens with the reward system. I have to treat everybody the same. Now, the way in which I might communicate to an individual, from what I hear you saying, is almost as if the individual have to figure out if they're a driver and expressive and analytical and amiable. And I might adjust my communication style to more effectively get my message across to that person. You're saying now what you need to do, John, if you're communicating one-on-one with these people, is also try to factor in some of these other variables that you should be aware of to more effectively communicate one-on-one. But what I also understand on the flip side is you're not telling me that I need to treat the entire people on a team differently. It's just more of how I would communicate and get my message across. Is that right?
Yeah, that's exactly right, John. I think the other thing you said that's sort of a non-obvious point here is clarity is kind. You being very clear as a leader about what you value, what you expect, what you're going to sort of measure people on. I find a lot of leaders are not clear.
Right.
They aren't clear at all. They don't articulate what they expect, how they're going to measure people, what is or isn't expected. And so that lack of clarity then it sort of like exacerbates this point about I need to hear information one way and somebody else may need to hear it a different way. I think the other thing,
you can get into trouble. If you start treating different groups or different generations completely different across the team, you're going to start to lose the team because that's a pretty slippery slope.
Agree. This is more about your own awareness about your own set of values, your own belief system, as well as what is needed and how you can make just slight adjustments in terms of, getting the team to hum.
Yeah.
It's not about wholesale, treat Joey completely different than Sally, because that absolutely can get you into trouble.
Right. Once you start to have like special people on a team, then it becomes more about me and individuals, then it becomes about the team. And to me, there's nothing more important than the team.
Agree.
Totally. I think this is such a great topic, because as I'm reflecting on myself, like I've been doing what I've been doing, standing up in front of large groups of people, trying to get them to commit to do things that they might not want to do, and to change outcomes and change behaviors. And to me, it's the best advice I probably ever got was know your audience. And it didn't mean that I could change, because it's very difficult for me to change who I am. I'm 61 years old now, but to know my audience meant it was more about my audience than it was about me. And I think that's what makes people effective communicators. I think that what makes them effective leaders. And that's Egypt old. That's never changed. When you take an outside-in approach to your communication, you're making about others before you're making it about yourself. So I love the way this conversation's going down. I mean, like, I was wondering like how we're going to go here. We got Johnny McMahon and we got Kaplan who come maybe from some, direct leadership, if you will. And then we have, a human capital management expert with all of this stuff going on in the world today and the difficulties. So I've got a lot of empathy for our listeners. Doesn't matter if you're a leader, doesn't matter if you're somebody on a team collaborating, you got to know your audience. Do you agree with that, Hollie?
Totally agree. And one of the things that I think is going to be, this is not going to be an aha or a surprise to anyone who's in sales. But as you think about the broader organization, customer centricity or audience centricity, and developing your pitch, developing your product around your customer, around your audience is such a critical skill going forward. And, in sales, you've known this since the beginning of time. Like you just said, this is Egypt old. But I will say this, as you think across an organization, which is the chair I've sat in for a while, is looking all the way across the organization. That is not a mindset that I think has been prevalent in a lot of organizations. So totally agree with what you just said.
Yeah. And I just want to go back to the effective communication one-on-one. As leaders, you have to, again, understand you have to be kind of a little intimate with your people in the sense that you understand their strengths, their weaknesses, insecurities, doubts, goals, motivations. Then you have to also understand, like I was saying before, whether or not they're a driver, analytical and amiable, expressive, and how they want to receive information. And now what you're really telling us to do is add on top of that a little bit more from the generation they grew up in to more effectively communicate one-on-one with them.
Yeah. And I think, John, there's something embedded in what you're saying, which is around curiosity as a leader. So getting really curious as a leader about the individual in front of you in a way that is respectful, obviously, but maybe goes a layer deeper than we went in maybe, even 10 years ago, and getting curious about things that are driving them, the choices that they make, ways that they act. And it puts a lot of burden on a leader. It makes that role of leadership that much more difficult.
Mm-hmm. But like Johnny says on getting intimate with your people, I just love this. And again, the more information we get, the more aha moments we get that life really hasn't changed all that much. It's still know your audience. I got dropped off into Germany in 1999 and assessed the team, found some great leaders. I wanted to move people around and me having no knowledge that at that time, people were growing up in their grandparents' houses. Like their parents bought a house or built a house, their grandparents did, then their parents did, then it was expected they did. I couldn't get anybody to move. And I'm representing that in my mind, that nobody's motivated here. Nobody wants to move. And this was I'm so thankful for the experience that I had out of country, because this whole topic really comes to mind of, I didn't really have an understanding of my audience. There was no expectation in their lives before that they would move their families or do that. And now, I mean, it might be different now, but when I was there, and so it just made me look irrelevant and made me look insensitive. I wasn't trying to do it, but I'm like, hey, I'm providing opportunity, move. And they're like, finally somebody whispered to me, hey, bud, they don't move. They're not moving. We're not moving. So anyways, I thought that was just a great example. And the more I could learn, that's where we are now. The more information I have about my audience, the better communicator I'm going to be. Doesn't mean I'm going to stop looking for opportunities for each and every individual. It's going to help me get a little bit more intimate with each one, as John calls it. Really important.
Hey, Hollie, you did talk about one of the questions was, how do these characteristics play into the hiring process? Can you expand on that a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, I think as you think about your teams and building your teams, a lot of times what we'll do or what we'll see is a leader comes forward and says, I need to hire this. I need to hire this person, this skilled. But rarely do I see a leader step back and say, what's the composition of the entire team? And what are the characteristics, in addition to the skills that I need for the work that I need done, what are the characteristics that I need to also represent on this team to round out the team? So that's kind of the first step. And you can make that step fast. It doesn't have to, take 3 weeks to do that. That can be a quick assessment of what is additionally needed. But I think if you are, especially if you're looking to transform, if you're at a transformation point, or you're looking to expand or grow, and you've got a lot of the same kinds of thinkers, this is one of the lenses that I would really encourage a leader to look at. When you think about these dimensions, what will enhance or detract from the team if you bring in yet another person that has the same kind of mindset or a different kind of mindset? How open are we as a team to having us be challenged? So I'll give you an example, John. I just came from an organization, and it was the first time I've worked in a lot of global companies, but it was the first time I had worked for a Russian CEO, a Ukrainian, chief transformation officer, an Israeli CTO, an Indian CPO, and 90% of the organization, English was not their first language. And there was a very sizable group of Eastern Europeans. So I had to get really curious about, okay, what are the elements that I need to learn about as we're building these teams out that are really important here culturally. So I think, as you think about your hiring process, your team makeup, how much or little of the same or different do you need? I think those are really, really important questions. And then I would also say, in terms of your hiring process, some of these softer things that are actually really important in driving the team to do what you're trying to get them to do, I find that we shy away from these really direct conversations. So one of the companies I consulted to, they have a really clear sort of work ethic. And we work 55 to 60 hours a week. But they weren't willing to say that to candidates. And then they were getting very surprised when people would come in, and at hour 40, they were like, okay, I'm going home now. I value work-life balance and I'm out. And so then they were having all these failures. So that's an example of, they actually had a really clear belief system about what their work culture was, but they weren't really willing to talk about it. And I think in the hiring process, that's important.
Yeah, that's really powerful. And also from the perspective of the leader or even the employee, if you don't match to those items, then you actually, like John said about the Germans not wanting to move, that you just think that they're difficult, and you can't really sell them. But the issue is that you don't understand them, and you don't understand the why. Why won't they do it? Or why are they unwilling to move?
Yes. Yeah.
I think some other things we're talking about here are we miss opportunities when we surround ourselves with people only like us. We miss opportunities for innovation. I'm just thinking about, I call it the blessing of the huddle. I was a American football player, and in that huddle, all the huddle cared about was that you could play and you could perform. So I huddled next to blacks, whites, purple, blind, or crazy, rich, poor, and I'm sure a lot of other specifications now. But what I mean by that was we didn't care. Like it was funny, like how that didn't always translate to business teams. In that sports team, we just wanted to win, and it didn't matter whether you're a freshman and you could play and you took a senior spot. That's how it was. You didn't have any like, well, you got to keep the senior in there because, and so I just would encourage all of us. In a business level, it's just so much area of opportunity to learn something new. I learned so much from people that are different than me. And, if you look around and everybody looks like you, or everybody talks like you, everybody sells like you, or what have you, there's probably an area of opportunity. You're missing some ability to bring some innovation in. You guys agree with that?
In the huddle, it could be made up of two different types of teams. The huddle could be made up of just a bunch of selfish individuals.
Sure.
Or it could be made up of a number of selfless teammates that support each other. So there's two different types of huddles, and you've seen them in sports and I've seen them in sports. You've seen them in business and I've seen them in business. And as a leader, you're trying to get selfless teammates, not selfish individuals on your team.
Yeah, it's such a good point. I think I would say the huddle didn't care. It did care about that. The huddle cared.
It knows. The huddle knows.
Yeah, the huddle knows. If you were selfish, if you only cared about yourself, the huddle didn't accept it. That's a really great point.
Yeah.
So Hollie, bring us back to business. I just went back to Boise State here. About innovation, though. I mean, how do you do that? You're consulting. You come in, you look around. Probably takes you 5 minutes to assess whether or not they have innovative thoughts and ideas from multiple cultures, multiple skill sets. Is that still a challenge today? Are you still talking to people like, hey, look around?
Oh, yeah, 100%. 100%. And I think, you sort of say, why haven't we evolved beyond that? Well, I think I would hypothesize one reason is the set of information flow is faster than it's ever been. The quantity of information is faster than it's ever been. There's a level of uncertainty that is very destabilizing in what is becoming, sort of the largest generation of workers in history. And they haven't experienced a lot of these things. So there's, if you look at like a company that is primarily Gen Z and millennial right now, they have gone through things that we don't have playbooks for. They went through things like COVID. None of us went through a pandemic. There was no playbook for any of us, but there were other life experiences for some that are a little bit older that, you could mirror and you could say, well, I've gone through this. And so this might give me some insight into how I need to operate here. But I think, there's just an immense amount of change, uncertainty in the world, and information flow that's faster than ever. And so that's one of the reasons I think that you're seeing us revisit this conversation time and time again, because the landscape is changing so fast under our feet.
I think about it like, if you're not open to new experiences, this is Egypt old too. If you're not open to new experiences and learning new things from others, if you're not willing to be open and learn, if you're not willing to share like you just said, there's some wonderful experiences that I had that I felt I was able to share with people around, hey, I know this is tough, like COVID sucked. But we've seen some crap before and we've survived. And some of the people I was talking to just had never seen it before. And so it was important for me and others that had some experience to not hold it, not judge anybody, but share it and give people, enthusiasm about, hey, we've seen some bad stuff before, but just look at the history. The trend is our friend. So there's kind of two messages there. No matter where you fall on the spectrum of gens, you have powerful experiences, and I encourage everybody. I think we had a guest on. It might have been Marcy, John, where Marcy was talking about the responsibility. Sure, the responsibility of the communicator is to know the audience. The responsibility of the audience is to understand the communicator and the leader. And I thought that was great advice. There is a responsibility on both ends.
I love that. That is a great quote. I'm going to use that going forward. I love that.
Yeah. Johnny, before we transition, anything else to add on that?
I was just thinking about your huddle thing. And some things, even if they're Gen Zs or millennials, some are different ethnic groups. Some are rich, some are poor, some have different experiences. Some might have served in the military, some might and seen horrific things. Other people might not have. Maybe they've been cuddled their whole life until they come to work. So it always goes back to understanding who's the person in front of you and trying to be as intimate as possible. And what Hollie's just bringing to light here is that there's other factors that we need to consider when we're communicating with people.
Yeah, I like that. Hollie, in our pre-talk, you were talking to us about the flood of requests that you're getting to try to understand AI implications. Can you just kind of lead that conversation off for us?
Yeah. So it's, when Gen AI, AI has been around for a long time. We all know that, like years, 10, 15 years. Gen AI is sort of the new talk of the town, if you will. And, creating something net new, generative. What's interesting to me is how fast it's learning, how incredibly fast this is going. I was in the Silicon Valley when the internet was actually coming online, and it was a very exciting time, and it seemed earth-shatteringly fast. This is so much faster. Yeah. And so much more, we'll have the opportunity to be so much more ubiquitous. And I think what I'm hearing a lot in the circles, and there's been a bunch of really interesting studies done by consulting firms around Gen AI, but it's right now there's a lot of focus on efficiency, risk, governance. I think 2 or 3 of the consulting firms recently put out studies that say 40 to 50% of organizations don't have a Gen AI or an AI strategy, aren't really embracing it yet. They're sort of asking their service providers to deal with that. And then there's a very small percentage that are, really, really leaning in or at the very early stages. So there's a huge opportunity, in my opinion, for efficiency, but there's also a huge opportunity for innovation. And the innovation conversation is the conversation I don't see happening quite yet, but I think it's coming. Or it's happening in, sort of unique circles, in particular, maybe more in the tech sector. If you go out of the tech sector, it's depending on which industry you're talking about, it may not be prevalent yet. But, from an efficiency standpoint, anything that's a repeatable task, anything that's a repeatable process is up for grabs. And, in sales, we talked about this in our pre-call time, everything from discovery calls to building, curated sales pitch to crafting the perfect follow-up note. All of that has immense, opportunity for Gen AI and for efficiency. Something that used to take you maybe 5 to 6 hours can take you 5 to 6 minutes now. If I think more broadly across an organization, I think about from a people standpoint, there's a massive, opportunity for HR organizations, for the people organizations to transform and really take a hard look at people data and analysis and making that more ubiquitous and sort of the flow of everyday work versus some sort of special request. Everything from using bots to answer questions when an employee wants the answer versus having to wait for someone. Coaching feedback. I'm doing some advising to a couple of CEOs for AI companies where they're building some very sophisticated AI bots AI platforms actually that will provide incredibly rich coaching, training, workforce planning. I'm doing some work with another firm that's doing, prediction around retention analysis. Who's going to leave and when are they going to leave and what can you do? And here's a really concrete action plan, culture and sentiment. So all of these processes have the opportunity to be redefined and streamlined. And I think one of the biggest opportunities is for hiring. I did a product deep dive the other day on a very sophisticated technology, really interesting around hiring. And at the end of it, they were asking me, I would have been their customer. So they sell the CHROs, they sell the CFOs. And they asked me at the end of it, so what are your sort of big takeaways? And I said, well, okay, so if I understand the technology correctly, this platform and what it gives me, in my previous lives, I would have probably needed a third to a quarter, maybe a quarter of the recruiting team that I needed. That didn't mean those people wouldn't have jobs. Maybe we retrain them to go do something different. But the efficiency this particular technology would have created in my organization is, mind-boggling. And they didn't lead with that. And I said, did I get that right? And they said, absolutely. And I said, maybe lead with that because that's actually an efficiency play. But you have to do it in a way that, doesn't scare people off. Because, when you say efficiency, a lot of people immediately go to, oh, that means a bunch of people are going to lose their jobs. From an innovation standpoint,
it's like the old days at PTC. I mean, when I had to learn that, the model of, replacing engineers, going in and telling them that they'd have less engineers to an engineering manager. It didn't take me that long to figure out to, know your audience. That's not working on, or to an IT person, tell them they'll need less IT resources. I run into this every day. And that's the value proposition of the company. You'll need less resources when 80% of all IT projects are late and or over budget. That message is going to fall flat on its face. So it's funny. Like, I think everybody's kind of hung up on job displacement, but the efficiency part is just massive. I think it's massive.
It's massive. I think the innovation part is the one that's coming. And there's so much exciting opportunity on so many levels with Gen AI. I was talking to a CEO the other day of a biomedical engineering firm. And what they do is they're off to create customized surgical plans for really, really complex surgeries by individual patient.
Wow.
Using Gen AI, and then taking that information and making customized parts for that patient with 3D technology. And I kept saying, gosh, this seems like it would have a massive sort of implication in other types of surgeries. But he's starting with a particular type of surgery. And so I thought, that's an incredible level of innovation that today doesn't exist. And like that, there's so many others. I was talking to a professor at a grad school the other day, and she was saying they're experimenting with Gen AI, and she had to remind her graduate class that Anna is not a person. So they have a student in their classroom called Anna, who is learning at an amazing pace. And Anna's bringing up all these different things in the classroom, in their virtual classroom. And Anna's an actual, AI bot.
Wow.
So I think there's immense opportunity for innovation as well. Now, I also would say, and I think this is important to say, there's some, challenges. One of the not so sexy challenges, if you will, for organizations is data quality. It's not a really fun, exciting thing to go clean up data, but these models, these algorithms, these platforms use vast quantities of data. And if your data is not accurate, it's not valid, you're going to get, garbage in, garbage out. So there's those challenges as well. And then there's all the other challenges that I think we would be remiss if we didn't say. Things like, accuracy of recommendations, IP infringement, privacy, cyber risks. Those are real concerns that I think companies are really, going to work through over the next several years.
And human element, like the easy one for me is, I just read it. One of my son's friends passed away, and I'm just devastated. I coached him in football back in the days. A really, really good, great young man. And I read something that my son sent to me, and it was obviously created with Gen AI. And it was horrific. There was no human element in it. I think they were just trying to get information out. They said 5 times in the thing that they don't know what happened to the kid. So it was obvious that whatever was generating that, they wanted to get something out quickly. And I sent a note to my son. I said, hey, that's a really great example of the lack of a human element in AI. And I've used the tools myself. We'll talk about that more in sales specifically, but I always go back and look for the human element, because until my Gen AI is talking to your Gen AI, we're still going to be looking for that human element. I'm not saying that's not going to happen someday, but you can tell when a human element's missing.
100%. And I think, so one of the key skills that I believe are going to be really important is this judgment and assessment. You cannot, at least at this stage, and maybe it'll change in the future, but at this moment, you absolutely can't remove judgment and assessment, human judgment and assessment.
So Hollie, if we go back to hiring, and you're saying that most of the AI is going to take care of most of the mundane tasks. So you start to think, or at least I do, accounting, some software development, call centers, recruiting, as you pointed out. Doesn't that mean that I have to start to find people that are more highly knowledgeable and highly specialized in certain areas? Because if AI is going to take care of a major part of, let's say, accounting, I'm going to need more specialized people to see, and knowledgeable to see if that the answers I'm getting from AI are the answers that I believe are correct. And then, probing AI for different types of answers.
Yeah.
Well, so change the hiring profile. I also think, just on the same subject, that it has to start to change the universities, because, why do I need a 4-year degree? If I got AI that does all these mundane tasks, why can't I get a 2-year degree that's just as good as the 4-year degree that they're giving now, maybe even better? It might even be a 1-year degree. And then people move up into the masters and the PhDs to be more highly specialized and highly knowledgeable, to be able to generate, LLMs and understand, how AI is being interpreted.
Yeah. So I think it's a great point, John. I think it's a journey. And depending on what company industry you're talking about, they're at a very early stage in their continuum on their journey to, some of them are far more advanced. So
but
this is
going to happen. It's going to be a moment where all of a sudden somebody comes out with a software package that just does away with 50% of the people in the call center, 50% of the, the people that are in accounting and finance.
It's happening now. I mean, it's happening now. You're definitely reading about, companies that have displaced a certain number of their workers, or reskilled workers to go do something different because Gen AI replaced those jobs. So I think you're absolutely right. I think, the university systems are going to be challenged to really rethink their business model, frankly, as well as how they deliver content, information, and what they deliver, what's actually required. I think some of the more progressive universities will get that earlier than others. And it may take some sort of, it'll become that sort of existential crisis, I think, for some of them. I think as it relates, one of the things I like to say is, I don't think that Gen AI is going to replace humans, or at least it's not in the near term. But so for people that say, I'm so scared about my job, what am I going to do? I think that humans that learn how to partner, leverage, and become experts in using Gen AI as a critical partner, those are the humans that will be most in demand. So this gets back to sort of self-reflection. How are you developing yourself? Those that don't embrace this at all, I think those folks are going to have a very hard time through this next period of time. And this has absolutely nothing to do with age. This has nothing to do with where you grew up or anything else. This has to do with your own sort of mindset about how do you either engage or not engage.
Man, I grew up in Michigan, and we would, if the tornado was coming, they tell you, look out at look out in the sky. And if it gets really dark and green and stuff stops moving, and then they said, if you can hear like a train or a freight train, then, start running for the hills. Well, I'm telling you now, you can hear the freight train. You can see the sky. It's not a question of, if, it's totally a question of when. And I'm reminded by something when I was trying to understand like Bitcoin and NFTs, and I was calling my financial guy and I said, I don't understand this. And he asked me a question. He said, well, do you want to learn about it? And I said, yeah. He goes, well, start using it. And I was like, well, what do you mean? And he goes, there's an easy way. Just start to use it and see if it, don't go all in on something you don't understand. And I got to tell you, Hollie and John, in the last 5 weeks, I've had more companies call me, very specifically call Force Management to talk to us about our AI strategy. And that wasn't lost on me. I've had more people call me in the last 5 weeks than in 20 years on a topic. And there's been a lot of topics in 20 years. And so what I know is, so I had to just start using it. And we can talk a little bit about that on what you're seeing. Like, what do you, I'd like to hear what you guys are using, but I'm having a blast just dabbling.
Yes.
Personal self, because I can't lead a company on a strategy for AI if I have no concept even what it could do for me personally, if that makes sense.
Oh, it makes perfect sense to me. This is about curiosity. I mean, I've set a goal for myself to do at least an experiment a day. Some of the experiments are really short. Some of them have to do with business. Some of them are personal, so that I can learn. And they span a very, very broad range of tools. It's not just using, Claude AI or ChatGPT. It's, what other tools are out there that I can play with, I can experiment with. Some of them have been great. Some of them haven't been great. I've been blown away by some of the results of the experiments and what I've been able to create. So from an innovation standpoint, but also just the time saved for me.
Yeah, me too. Johnny, I don't even want to ask you, are you still using a computer? What?
I have an abacus and a slide rule.
Are you using any?
Really
Johnny?
Nice, Kaplan. Throwing in some jabs.
Okay,
our listeners coming back your way, Hollie.
Listeners who listen to us all the time, that's like maybe 1 compared to 500 that you give me every time. So,
no,
are you using Johnny in your daily life?
A little bit with ChatGPT, but not much else. I don't really see it affecting my life that much. I'm waiting for it to happen. People that I talk to in companies are waiting for it to happen, but I don't really hear anybody saying, in sales or leadership saying, oh my God, there's this one tool just came out. It's unbelievable. I haven't seen that yet.
Yeah. It's funny you say that.
Lots of startups that when I listen to the concept of what they're building with AI, it blows you away when they tell you what they're doing, but that software is not out yet. It'll be out in the next, couple of years.
Yeah. That's why I said I think it's a journey. I think this is going to take a little bit of time. And I think we think it's going to happen overnight. It's coming.
It's coming.
Just, how long does it take?
I'll tell you, in those conversations I've been having, I'm acutely aware of people are picking off low-hanging fruit, which as an executive on my end in a company does me no good to start expanding the tech stack. So that's the next revolution that's going to come. People are doing unbelievable things from a sales perspective. In discovery, I've seen some unbelievable tools, generative AI tools that I use, that save me, an hour preparing to make a call on a company or a CEO or what have you. Fantastic. Now, when you think about the work stream, you think about what the customer goes through to make a decision, that's going to be impacted by generative AI. And just like anything else, I'm just giving a little advice here. Hopefully, I know it's unsolicited to our audience, but if you're a sales company, if you're running a sales organization and you're not first starting with what's it going to do for your customer, then you're going to run into a problem. Because I see things, I've seen unbelievable solutions. Hey, we could do this, we could do that, we could do this. Now all of a sudden we have 7 different tech solutions or more to start doing generative AI. And it's going to, first of all, it's going to slow down. It's actually going to slow down the sellers because nothing happens in a vacuum. And if it's not outside in, meaning how's it going to make it better for our customers, I don't think that's ever going to go away. Those are going to be the 2 big principles for me.
Well, and I think if you add in sort of where we are economically, and how companies are or are not spending money, if you're not able to articulate what goes away, how fast in terms of the tech stack, that's sort of a no-go. Right now, people are not looking to add on to their tech stack. They're looking to consolidate their tech stack.
I think, Johnny, that's why you're not seeing it too much right now.
Right. Yeah. No, CFOs are scrutinizing all the purchases right now and the renewals. So if you're a subscription software company, you better have, justified your solution cost effectively. Otherwise, that thing's not going to renew.
Let's talk a little bit in the remaining time, if you guys are up for it. Like we just talked a little bit, get curious. I love that. Hollie, you've always told us that. Stay curious, get curious. I think that's great advice. Other advice that we could give people on just, figuring out, how do you get curious, Hollie? Let's start there. How do you get curious?
Well, I think you made a really good point. If you're not using Gen AI on a daily basis and you think that this is going to have an impact in your world, go start using it. Just go play with it. Just go do experiments with it. Everything from, so the way I've thought about ChatGPT and Claude is anything I used to put through Google, I'm now putting through ChatGPT and Claude.
Same.
And then, I'm listening to how other people are using it. I ask everyone how they're using it. I tend to ask some of the folks that are in earlier generations than me, how do you use it? Where do you use it? And I'm going and doing my own experiments with that. So that's one of the first things I would say. If you're not using it, like go familiarize yourself and start making it part of your daily activities. I was thinking about sort of the attributes that are going to be really important going forward for folks. So if you're looking at your own skill set or you're looking at the skill set on your teams, and John, you asked this question about staffing and hiring and more sophisticated skills. Absolutely. I think there's a set of core skills that are going to become really, really critical going forward around, the ability to analyze and interpret data, AI and machine learning, software development. That's always been a very high set of skills and demand. It's going to go up. A new one, or maybe an increased one, is ethics expertise. The ability to really understand and use ethical guidelines for the use of Gen AI. Cybersecurity is so hot right now. Cybersecurity skills, and then project management. I think project management skills are going to, the need for those skills. So if you're thinking about your own skills.
Yeah, good one.
So I'm not saying go out and do certificates on all of these different topics, but just know that those will be skills that are going to be more in demand. And then in terms of attributes, we talked a lot about curiosity and communication at the beginning. I think this ability to tell stories, to make a point, I think that continues to be a skill that, again, in sales, it's always been a skill that's been very important. But if you broaden across, if you think about engineering, if you think about legal or HR or finance, those are skills that I think are going to become really prevalent. Collaboration and teamwork. So
disciplines, storytelling in those disciplines now.
Correct.
Wow.
Correct. Collaboration and teamwork. So I think this takes on a whole new meaning. And what I mean by that is if you think about how organizations have thought traditionally, technology was kind of the responsibility of the IT organization or the CIO. People was the responsibility of the HR organization or the people organization. Legal was in charge of anything law related. Product organization owned product. I think as we go forward, the collaboration and teamwork takes on a whole new meaning. So I'm seeing CISOs or CIOs having to partner with their CHROs in a way that they never even used to talk to each other, or they'd be in an executive meeting that they weren't even, those were two different worlds. Today, they're having to come together and collaborate on solutions for an organization or strategies. Innovation, as you're building products for customers, having this agile mindset, which inherently means you're bringing different perspectives to the table to build a product. You have a sales or a sales leader on the product team because you want customer-centric information in the building process of the product. That's a very different way to team. You've got some companies that were built that way, but a lot of companies were not. And so this openness to innovation mindset, openness to customer centricity, building products in an agile way with experimentation, which also means allowing for failure, which is a whole different sort of mindset. Like we actually want people to fail from time to time because we want to learn. That's a new set of skills and attributes I think are going to become really important. We talked about the change of pace.
I really think that's true. Yeah. I actually think that what you hit is I think that with AI, when people build software products, especially building applications, that there's going to be customer training and customer support built into the tool.
Yeah. Has to be.
Yeah.
We talked about the change of pace, the level of uncertainty in the world. And so I think one of the attributes that we're going to see coming forward that companies will hopefully begin to screen for is resiliency and flexibility. How resilient are people? Because the one constant that is going to continue to increase is change. And how resilient is your constitution as an individual? And I talk a lot about this when I'm talking to people that say they want to be in the C-suite and they want to be future leaders. And I'm like, really do a self-assessment about your armor. Really do a self-assessment about your constitution, your personal constitution. And it's okay if you say, I'm actually not up for this. So resiliency and flexibility, I think, is going to be important. I think, empathy is something that human beings, and John talked about intimacy with your folks, like really being empathetic and vulnerable with your people is a skill. And it's a skill that I think traditionally has not been super valued. It's been thought about as a soft skill or, one of those fluffy things. It's actually something that I think is a differentiator today. And then this notion of ethical leadership and transparency, there is a demand, especially with Gen Z, but there's a demand for transparency of information. And with that group, millennials and Gen Z being they're saying it will be the largest inheritors of wealth going forward in the world. Those then become your shareholders, and those become your shareholder activists. There's a lot of activism going on in companies today, employee activism. So I think this ethical leadership and transparency as an attribute is really important. And then we also talked about judgment and critical thinking. With AI and, using Gen AI as a part of day-to-day business, the ability to step back and say, wait a minute, does this make sense? Is this right? Are we missing something here? And having that judgment attribute, I think, is also important. So that was a lot, but those are the...
You brought the big guns here today, Hollie. Holy smokes. Wow.
It's a complicated world out there, guys.
That's a lot to think about.
Well, the one that she hit on, one that she hit on, John, that we always talk about, she used the word resiliency, but we always talk about coachability, but also adaptability, right? So some people are coachable, but they never adapt. Or as you said, they're not resilient enough to change. And, in the companies that John and I have been in that grow like 100% a year, sometimes you hire somebody and they're great for 2 years, but then they never change. They never adapt. They're not resilient. And then they look like a dinosaur. And others are really adapt, to the changing environment. And I think, with AI, like you said, it's going to change fast and really fast now. And you have to be able to adapt.
And you know what I like, Hollie, about the generative AI, John brought it up earlier on, maybe some dispositions that one might have. John talked about, analyticals and expressives and, rather than go deep, we should probably do a segment on that on deep. Maybe we'll have you back and talk about those character traits and what they mean. But I will tell you, as being an expressive myself, storyteller, and normally the challenge for that has been dealing with technical people or analytical people that have trouble with sifting through the story to get the facts. But the generative AI tools, I feel like are giving me so much more adaptability, as John said, because I can almost incorporate more technical aspects, more financial aspects or what have you, because I have so much information at my fingertips. And so again, I think knowing your audience, the responsibility of the communicator, the responsibility of the one receiving the information. I really like what you highlighted here today. There's no excuses anymore. There's an ability to adapt. I'm not saying that you have to change from anything, but I think we're all going to be pressed to adapt more than we've ever been pressed probably in our lifetimes. I don't find that a bad place to be.
I agree.
Man, that was awesome. We started off with the different generations. We ended up with generative AI. Hollie, you just well, first of all, how do people find you in your new endeavors?
Right.
It's HC Advice, right?
Yep, HC Advice. You can send me an email, hollie@hcadvice.com. I'm on LinkedIn. Happy to help in any way I can. I'm super enjoying this next chapter.
Yeah. You're so ready for it. I've just found you so on the edge of what is happening from people management, and now the impact on technology and people management. So thank you for what you do for us, and I know we know you're going to crush it in your new endeavor.
Thank you. You guys are awesome. I love doing this. This is so fun.
Thanks, Hollie. I've always appreciated you so much. So thanks again.
And you, Mr. McMahon.
All right. Thanks to Hollie, thanks to Cap, and thanks to everyone for listening to another episode of the Revenue Builders Podcast.
Thanks for listening to today's episode. Be sure to check us out at forcemanagement.com.